A few days ago, I made a pilgrimage to one of the most famous monasteries in Russia, Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius. I'd call it a heart of Russian Orthodoxy because nowadays it is home to the largest publishing centers in Russian Church, and also it's a home to Moscow Theological Academy, the biggest seminary in Russia. And most importantly, this is where rest the relics of one of the most beloved Russian saints, Saint Sergius of Radonezh. I've been there many times before, but during this visit I decided to try and capture all the beauties and treasures of this wonderful place, and also to tell you about the saints who spent some time there, who lived there, or who helped to develop this monastery. The Lavra is located in Sergiev Posad, about 70 kilometers northeast of Moscow. You can get there either by car or by train from Yaroslavsky railway station. These are ticket offices where you can buy a ticket to Sergiev Posad. This is the way to the platforms. Just make sure to keep your ticket. It might be checked by a ticket inspector during the ride. We got tickets to Sergiev Posad, but we get off one stop earlier, in the town of Khotkovo, because first we wanted to venerate the relics of his parents, Saint Cyril and Maria of Radonezh, which rest in Pokrovsky Staropedal convent in Khotkovo. When reading about Saint Cyril and Maria, it becomes clear that the holiness of Saint Sergius did not come out of nowhere. In Rostov, the boyar Kirill and his wife Maria were known as a very deeply pious people. They chose to live in a village outside of town to avoid worldly temptations. They tried to follow all the church canons. They were very merciful and they always helped travelers and poor people, and they taught their kids to be merciful and hospitable. They raised 3 sons, 2 of them got married, but the youngest one, Bartholomew, begged them to allow him to become a monk, but they asked him to first look after them until they departed, and they promised he can follow his calling after they are gone. Toward the end of their lives, following a common Russian tradition, they took monastic vows in a Pokrovsky Staropedal convent, which back then was both convent and a monastery. They even received a great scheme, but didn't spend a lot of time in angelic state and soon peacefully passed on to the Lord. Saint Cyril and Maria are considered as patron saints of family life and marriage, and are truly shining examples of what a Christian family can be. Saint Sergius himself said that first, before coming to him, before asking him for prayers, people should first come to the relics of his parents and pray for repose of their souls. So nowadays, it's a tradition. When people are going to venerate the relics of Saint Sergius, they first visit Khotkovo, where his parents' relics rest, and first venerate them. Filming inside the church is not allowed, but I did receive a blessing to take a few photos. The church has beautiful frescoes and many relics, including relics of Saint Seraphim of Sarov and several shrines from Diveevo. Today, the monastery also runs a boarding home for girls who face difficult family situations, and we saw these girls cheerfully helping nuns to plant flowers, and it looks like they are pretty happy there. After visiting the Khotkovo monastery, we headed back to the station, caught the train, and in just about 5 minutes we were already in Sergiev Posad. From the station, it's only a 10-minute walk to the monastery. In 1337, Bartholomew and his older brother Stephen, who took monastic vows after his wife passed away, settled together on the hill near Khotkovo. They cut down trees with their own hands and built a cell and a small church dedicated to the Holy Trinity, and this moment is considered as the founding of the Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius. We went straight to the Trinity Cathedral, where the relics of St. Sergius rest. This cathedral was always especially revered by Moscow's princes. Prayers were held here before military campaigns and after their successful completion, and royal heirs were baptized here. Filming inside is not allowed, so I'll share some photos from the Lavra's official website. Just last year, the Lavra received the icon of the Holy Trinity painted by Andrei Rublev, the greatest Russian icon painter. For over a century it was kept in museums, but now it has finally returned home. But the main treasure is, of course, the relics of Saint Sergius. As I mentioned, young Bartholomew, after his parents passed away, with his brother Stephen, started hermetic life not far from Khotkovo. But soon Stephen grew weary of this difficult and harsh life and left to Moscow to the monastery of Epiphany. Young Bartholomew then took monastic vows with the name of Sergius and spent 2 years in complete solitude. One day the holy hermit shared the piece of his bread with a bear, and from that day on the bear would constantly come to the cell of Saint Sergius, and Saint Sergius would share his even last piece of bread with him. No matter how hard Saint Sergius was trying to hide his ascetic feats, word of them spread, and other monks came to him wanting to be saved under his guidance. Saint Sergius was a great example of strict abstinence, deep humility, and unwavering trust in God's help. After Mongol invasion, Russian monasteries fell into a deep decline. Most monasteries from the pre-Mongol period were located in or near large cities, which made them easy targets for invaders. They were destroyed, and their inhabitants were almost completely wiped out. One of the Saint Sergius' greatest contributions was restoring the authentic understanding of the monastic life. He re-established the communal monasticism and taught that the monastic vows is not a guarantee for salvation, but just the beginning of a new life full of struggle for holiness. His example inspired generations of monks. Among his disciples we can see such saints as Nikon of Radonezh, Sava Storozhevsky, Paul of Obnora, Ferapont of White Lake, Cyril of White Lake. Together they founded more than 40 monasteries and spread the spiritual legacy of Saint Sergius all across Russia, especially throughout the north, a region often called the Northern Tibet. Saint Sergius is also known as the patron saint for students. As a child, Bartholomew struggled greatly with learning. Reading seemed impossible for him, but one day he met an angel sent by God in the guise of a monk. The elder was standing under the oak tree in the middle of the field, praying. Bartholomew approached him, bowed low, and waited for the elder to finish his prayer. The monk blessed the boy, kissed him, and asked what he wanted. Bartholomew replied, "With all my heart, I wish to learn to read and write, Holy Father. Pray to God for me, that he may help me to understand letters." The monk fulfilled Bartholomew's request, prayed to God, and blessed the boy, saying, "From now on, my child, God gives you the gift of understanding the letters. You will surpass your brothers and peers." With these words, the elder gave Bartholomew a piece of prosphora. "Take it, my child, and eat it. This is given to you as a sign of God's grace." From that day on, Bartholomew found it easy to master literacy and other studies, and later he became one of the most educated men of his time. Even during his lifetime, Saint Sergius performed miracles and was granted great revelations. Once, the Mother of God appeared to him in wondrous majesty, accompanied by the apostles Peter and John, and promised her protection over his monastery. There is, of course, so much more to tell about this wonderful saint, so I highly encourage you to read about his life if you haven't done it yet. This cathedral also holds many other revered relics, including the relics of the proto-martyr Stephen, the relics of Nikon of Radonezh, and a piece of the belt of the Most Holy Lady Theotokos. Our next stop was the Dormition Cathedral. Just look at these frescoes. I didn't want to film too much inside this church, but there are also many holy relics here, so I'll share my photos. First, in the Dormition Cathedral rest the relics of Innocent of Moscow, Metropolitan of Moscow and the first bishop of Kamchatka, Yakutia, the Amur region, and North America. He was a great missionary, often called the Apostle of Siberia and America. Reading about St. Innocent feels like stepping into Jack London's novels. His missionary territory was the largest in the world. It included Kamchatka, Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, the Kuril Islands, parts of Siberia. To visit all his parishes, St. Innocent traveled many hours by boat, by dog sled, by horseback. He learned local languages, translated books, established schools, and personally taught both kids and adults. St. Innocent deeply loved the Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius. He cared for the monks, set up free dining rooms for pilgrims, and tried, though unsuccessfully, to have Lavra commercial properties exempted from taxes. This church also holds the tomb of St. Sergius, and in the crypt beneath there is a burial vault for prominent hierarchs of the Russian Orthodox Church and members of the royal family. After that, we visited the Refectory church, where we venerated the relics of St. Maximus the Greek and St. Anthony of Radonezh. I'd like to say a couple of words about St. Maximus the Greek, a saint with a very difficult life who made a lot for Russian Church. Maximus the Greek was a Greek intellectual, brilliantly educated. He studied in Paris, Florence, and Venice, but instead of pursuing a brilliant career, at the age of 35 he decided to take monastic vows on Mount Athos, where he studied ancient manuscripts. Around that time, Grand Prince Vasily Ivanovich of Moscow wanted to make sense of the Greek manuscripts and books belonging to his mother, Sophia Paleolog, and turned to the Patriarch of Constantinople with a request to send him an educated Greek scholar, and the monk Maximus was ordered to go to Moscow. Upon arrival, he was tasked with the translation of the commentaries on the Book of Psalms and the Book of Acts. St. Maximus put a lot of effort in translation. He did it diligently and carefully, but since Slavonic wasn't his native language, he made a couple of inaccuracies. Maximus the Greek refused to translate Theodora's church history, pointing that it includes letters of Arius, schismatic, and saying that it could be dangerous for quote-unquote simple-minded. He also rebuked the prince for wanting to divorce his wife, for which he was imprisoned and spent 26 years in confinement. During his final years, the saint lived in the Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius and continued translation works. Together with his disciple, they translated the Book of Psalms from Greek to Slavonic. Our next stop was the Church of the Intercession of the Holy Virgin, which belongs to Moscow Theological Academy. The Moscow Theological Academy Museum is also located here, and I highly recommend visiting it if you have the opportunity. We came to the monastery shortly after the Feast of Pentecost, so you can see the birch branches in church. Not far from here is a grave of the Archimandrite Kirill Pavlov, one of the most beloved spiritual fathers of the Russian Church in the 20th century. He served as the spiritual father of 3 patriarchs of Moscow and was often called the spiritual father of all Russia. No pilgrimage is complete without a visit to the monastery bookstore. The Lavra's bookstore has an enormous selection of spiritual literature, from the writings of the Holy Fathers to modern books. By the time we left the monastery, we had spent nearly the entire day there, and somehow even made a few new friends. Every visit to monastery gives me the deep feeling of grace and, if I can put it this way, a motivation, because the holiness is not something from the ancient books. It is something lived by people just 70 kilometers away from the place where I live right now. And making pilgrimages to monasteries, learning more about saints, I think greatly helps us in our unseen warfare. Myself, I am greatly inspired by the examples of saints, so that's why I decided to insert less of the beautiful landscapes and beautiful pictures, but to concentrate more on the lives of the saints. I hope you like this video and see you in the next one.